Hi, I'm Dr. Krista Kurlinkus, creator of Grant Writing Made Easy, and I want to talk to you about what percentage of your nonprofit's budget should salaries and administrative costs be. Budgets. They're the trickiest part of a grant for most grant writers and nonprofit leaders, partly because they require good forecasting skills and excellent bookkeeping systems, and partly because there's just a lot of confusion around standard practices. Every nonprofit blog out there and every charity watchdog has something to say about how much of a nonprofit's budget should go to salaries or programs or fundraising expenses, and how much should come from donations or grants or earned revenue. Now, I understand the impulse here in assigning a number or percentage to each of those categories. Donors and grantmakers want to know that their money is going to an organization that is financially healthy and stable, and that is one measurement that they use. But too often the advice you hear is an oversimplification. Every nonprofit is different. The needs of a food bank are different from a community and economic development organization, and their needs are different from those of a performing arts nonprofit. And that's not to mention how common measurements of financial health, like percentage of budget going to programs, for example, are impacted by inconsistencies in reporting. How one organization categorizes program expenses on their 990 could be totally different from another. So where does this leave us? Let's explore some of the most common metrics, the widely accepted targets, and where the wiggle room is for you. First, let's talk about how much of your expenses should be salaries and other administrative costs. This question is the one that people tend to get the most hung up on. There's so much buzz around nonprofit overhead and keeping it low. The Better Business Bureau says that no more than 35% of a nonprofit's budget should be spent on overhead. Charity Watch and Charity Navigator also award higher ratings to nonprofits that spend less on overhead. What's important to keep in mind is that portions of your staff salaries can probably be allocated to programs. For example, imagine you're the executive director of an organization that runs an after-school program. And every Monday through Friday, you are at the program from 3 to 5 p.m. That means you're spending 10 hours or 25% of your 40-hour work week at that program. So 25% of your salary can be allocated to program costs. So yes, a general rule of thumb is that a higher proportion of a nonprofit's budget should go to program versus administrative expenses. But remember that not all salary costs count as admin or overhead. Now let's talk about how much of my expenses should be fundraising costs. Like the salaries overhead question, this one is also often oversimplified. The widely accepted metric is 15% or less of a nonprofit's budget should be spent on fundraising. So that's everything from the cost of hiring a grant writer to running fundraising events to doing those individual solicitations every year. Charity Navigator also assesses nonprofits on what they call fundraising efficiency. This is a calculation of how much money it costs a nonprofit to raise $1. They acknowledge that different types of organizations will have different goals here, but in general, they say it should cost between 3 cents and 20 cents to raise $1. What these measurements don't take into account is that it takes time to scale a good fundraising program. So for example, if you're looking to scale your programs, you need to scale your fundraising efforts. This might mean hiring a grant writer or development coordinator. The upfront investment in their salary could be $40K or higher. In their first year as they build new fundraising programs, the return on that investment might be $100K. Now that percentage, 40 cents to $1, is much higher than the top level recommended 20 cents to raise $1. But then next year, as your team develops better and better relationships with your donor base and hosts bigger and better fundraising events, your income from fundraising might jump to $500K, which puts you then at 8 cents to raise $1, a much better fundraising efficiency score. What I need you to understand is that it takes time to get to these metrics. Now let's talk about what percentage of revenue should come from fundraising, grants, and other sources. I bet you already know how I'm going to answer this question too. My answer is it depends. But there is a rule of thumb that I want every nonprofit to keep in mind. Diversify, diversify, diversify. So many new nonprofits rely on small, sporadic individual donations and fundraising events that, as we know, could get canceled if they're in person due to public health concerns. Or once they develop a good relationship with a grant maker, they count on that grant to be renewed year after year and don't even search for new opportunities to apply to. And don't forget that just because you are a nonprofit, it doesn't mean you can't charge a fee for your services. In some cases, this can even help strengthen program participation. People are more likely to take advantage of a resource or a service if they've made a financial investment in it, even a nominal one. Now, let's talk about taking stock of your budget and setting your own goals. I want you to spend half an hour today, block some time off on your calendar, and assess your budget. What percentage of your expenses are overhead, programs, fundraising? Where does your revenue come from? What percentage is from grants? What percentage is from individual donations? What percentage is from an annual fundraising event? What's the breakdown of recurring versus one-time donations? And then set a goal. Keep in mind industry expectations, but also your organization's unique situation. How could you improve your fundraising efficiency? Are there changes you can make in how you categorize your expenses? For example, are you lumping all staff salaries into overhead? Can some of those be allocated to program expenses? I'm not going to sugarcoat it. This can be challenging and confusing when you're new to budgeting, and we didn't even get into how to write the budget. If you are ready to take control of your organization's operating budgets and program budgets, check out my comprehensive grant writing course, Grant Writing Made Easy. We have an entire module dedicated to budgets. All right, thank you so much. I hope to see you in my course, Grant Writing Made Easy, and I'll share a link for that below. Bye.